Is Christmas a ripoff of Yule? Yep, what's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Hope everybody's having a good Lord's Day. Hope everybody was refreshed and rejuvenated and edified by worshiping the one and only God of the universe, the God of the Bible, the triune God. You know what I mean? So we gotta say what's up to the party people in the chat. We got Angela J10 at the check-in. We got the intellectual soapbox salute king. What's going on? Good to see you. Actually, we need to talk, man. Um, we gotta talk. We'd love to jump on your channel and do a little something, you know. And early on, we have a friend here saying Sunday's not the Lord's Day. Yeah, well, you gotta look at the scriptures to see otherwise. Okay. Anyway, so with that being said, um, as always, if you have not yet already, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. That's him again. And we're only a few weeks away from the new year, and the goal has been to try to make it to 5K subs before the year's end. And please check to see if you have subscribed, because you might think you have, but you really didn't. So check that you press that subscribe button, and also hit the notification bell so that when I pop up, you can be there to support your boy. And another way that you can support your boy is through showing some digital coinage love via PayPal, which I think the link is pinned on top of the chat. Or if you'd like to be a monthly supporter of BK, you can become a Patreon. We get so many gifts to enhance your personal Bible study. All right. We got GD Martin is in the building. What's going on? So, it's that time of year again, the holiday season. And of course, you've seen, actually, I haven't seen as much, which is good. I feel like we're making a dent on the whole Christian has pagan origin stuff, whether it's memes or other videos. Many people in the UA have definitely shot those things down. Peace to my man Kevin Benton and the whole Greater Works fam for doing just an amazing job. He just dropped a book, that completely refutes that claim. So please get that book. And so there's so many different things. The tree is pagan, the wreath is pagan, and putting gifts under the tree is pagan, and it comes from Nimrod and all this other stuff, right? That has been already thoroughly refuted. But there's another thing that people try to attach Christianity, not Christianity, well, in a sense, Christianity as well, but mainly Christmas. They try to attach Yule to Christmas. So what we're gonna do today is look to see if is Christmas a ripoff of Yule, this goddess, right? So, but a quick reminder, because timelines are important, right? The North African churches were actually one of the first churches to not only celebrate the birth of Christ, but to celebrate him on December 25th, prior to 311 AD. And we have Tertullian of Carthage and Hippolytus on their literature from the 3rd century AD, talking about the birth of Christ on December 25th. Now, there's a whole computation thing behind that we're not gonna get to. I've spoken about this and other videos about how they derived from December 25th, and no, it has nothing to do with Psalm Leviticus. But you need this context. So very early, right? Late fourth century and early second century, we had African churches already celebrating the birth of the Messiah. Okay. So now we're going to look at Bede, the Theologian, History, Rhetoric, and Spirituality by John P. Burkett. And this is what he says about Mr. Bede. The Reckoning of Time, which is one of the two treatises of his devoted to the question of liturgical calendar. Bede wrote the treatise in the year 725, that's 8th century, addressing it to Habert, the abbot of his monastery, and attending the work for his own students. It is one of the many educational and didactic treatises Bede composed for use in the monastic school of his community, serving as, quote, tools for the schoolmaster, serving him in viva voce teaching, unquote. In the treatise, Bede makes his own contribution to a literary genre, integrating the science of computus and historical time, a genre that had enjoyed a long pedigree with early Irish scholars. So the Venerable Bede, he was one of the earliest writers who tried to put down an ancient calendar that was known at that time. Now, this is written 8th century, right? Eight or like 600 to 700 years after Christians have already were worshiping, celebrating the birth of Christ. Okay, this comes way after that, right? And Nick Page says that it's clear from Bede's account that Guli, i.e., Yule, is not actually an event or even a festival. It's a 2-month period, really a kind of Anglo-Saxon word for winter, right? So when he breaks down this liturgical calendar, Yule here means just a time, a winter period, not a specific month or even a festival. And when you look at the Oxford Dictionary of English Folklore under Yule, it says this word in various spellings means a loosely defined midwinter period, not a single day. In the early languages of most Germanic and Scandinavian countries, Bede, writing of pagan England, mentions 2 months, early Yule and later Yule, corresponding to Roman December and January. So it's not, Yule is not December 25th. Yule is winter. It's basically a season. All right, and this is from Myths About Yule Debunked by Nick Page. The only accounts that equate Yule with a festival comes from a different time in a different part of Europe. They occur from around 1200 onwards and almost all in a saga by the Icelandic historian Snorri Sturluson, born in 1179. So prior to that, Yule was just a portion of a season in a calendar. That's all Yule was. That's all Yule was. So that's all it was. And it wasn't even considered a festival until the 1200s. Now, remember, in North Africa, they were already celebrating the birth of Christ, second, third century. There's no festival of Yule until 1200 years later. But even with that, there's some issues. And this is from Scandinavian archaeology. Followers of so-called neo-pagan religions like Wicca and Astru have sought to revive the old heathen Jule in their own observances. However, this is difficult endeavor as the holiday lays bare one of the most yawning gaps in our knowledge of the pre-Christian Norse. The neo-pagans, the modern pagans, are the ones that try to retrofit their belief systems back into ancient times. They're the ones that are really toting the flag, saying that, Christianity has these pagan origins. It's them. But the data doesn't support their claims. The fact is, we know terribly little about Norse paganism in actual practice. It's also unwise to generalize much because it is very likely that it varied greatly through time and space. The whole Norse world might have acknowledged the same essential pantheon of gods and probably marked the same major annual ceremonies. However, specific rituals may have differed among different regions of the Norse world, and different gods may not have been of uniform importance everywhere. And so, even a widespread pagan festival like Jule had an original form, it is possible that it looked quite different from observed in different areas. So, no one's really sure how this thing was observed. They know something was being observed in the 1200s, but we know very little about the practice of Norse paganism. So the modern day pagans are being disingenuous. So they're saying, oh no, it definitely comes from this. So I'm like, yeah, but we don't have the data to make that stick. We just don't. We know very little. We can start with the saga of Hakon the Good, king of Norway, 934 and 961 AD, from the Icelandic compendium Hemskringla, written by Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century. Remember, North African churches celebrating the birth of Christ, second, third century. This is 13th century we're talking about now. According to this saga, the pagan Jule was a 3-day event commencing at midwinter. This gives us a place to start looking, but with caution. The calendars used by the Old Norse were not the same as the one we are familiar with, nor for that matter was the Christian calendar of that day. More on that later, right? So there's various calendars being used during this time. So to pinpoint a direct one-on-one correlation with December 25th and this festival, well, you'll be hard-pressed to do that. We can piece together that the calendar used by the pre-Christian Norse was probably similar to other pre-Christian Germanic calendars, coordinating both the solar year, one solar orbit, roughly 365 days, and the shorter lunar year, 12 lunar cycles, 354 days. But the calendar used by Snorri, which has been used in Iceland since at least the 10th century, was different. 10th century. Again, North Africa, celebrating the birth of Christ, second, third century. This festival, what little we know of, around 10th century. While it still had 12 months, these lasted 30 days, each regardless of lunar cycle, with extra days added midsummer to fill in the day count of the solar cycle. The most basic division of the year was two halves: winter, or the time of short days from mid October to mid April, and summer, the time of nightless days, and vice versa. By reckoning of this calendar, midwinter, and therefore according to Snorri, Jule, would occur roughly in the middle of the Julian month of January. So, based on their specific Icelandic calendar around the 10th century that Suturin would use, it would the Snorri would use, Jule or Yule as we come to pronounce it, occurred in January. So you have a festival that we knew nothing of until 10th, 12th century. And what little we know of is that it wasn't in December, it was on January. And here's a big dagger right here. Jule took place only once every 9 years. Every 9 years. It wasn't a yearly festival when it finally became a festival. Because we're talking thousands of years after the African churches will celebrate the birth of Christ. This is happening thousands of years later. We know very little about how they participated, and the few things we know is that we found out about it 10th, 12th century, and that this festival, whatever this festival is, took place once every 9 years. But both accounts do agree on the time of year at least. This aside, various artifacts like rune staves point to a series of 3 days called Midvinternatena, midwinter nights, occurring with roughly 12 to 14 January in the Christian calendar of the day, the Julian calendar. When converted into the Gregorian calendar that used by most of the Western world, this places the midwinter nights from 19 to 21 of January, not December 25th. Not December 25th. And but what about like Yule logs? Right? We hear about Yule logs all the time. So the first mention of the Yule log is in Robert Herrick's Hypertides poetry collection, number 789, and he calls it a Christmas log. And here's the poem ceremony for Christmas. Come bring with noise, my merry, merry boys, the Christmas log to the firing. While my good dame, she bids ye all be free and drink to your heart's desiring. All right. First time we hear this. Way, way after the African churches was celebrating the birth of Christ. The Yule log or clog or Christmas block is mentioned in folklore collections from most parts of England, but especially the West Country and the North. It would be the largest piece of wood which could fit on the family hearth and was usually brought in on Christmas Eve with some ceremony and put on the fire that evening. Many writers, including Herrick, say it was kindled with a fragment kept from the previous year's log. It was also generally believed that it would be very unlucky for the family if the log was allowed to go out on Christmas Day. It's not clear when the custom arose, since the first definite reference are only from the 17th century, 1,700 years after the African Christians were celebrating the birth of Christ, is when this occurred. For example, Aubrey's in the West Riding of Yorkshire on Christmas Eve at night, they brought in a large Yule log or Christmas block and set it on fire, lapped their Christmas ale, and sang Yule, Yule, a pack of new cards in the Christmas stool. Yeah, this is from the Oxford Dictionary of English Folklore. So the Yule candle is mentioned in the 19th century. The Yule game mentioned in the 17th century. Yule log, first mentioned 18th century, and Yule tide, first mentioned 16th century. At least 1,000 years after the African churches were celebrating the birth of Christ. All right. So, you know, yeah, no one is fighting. No one has to celebrate Christmas. No one has to celebrate Christmas. What we're saying is that Yule is not Christmas does not come from Yule. That's all we're saying. It has nothing to do with Yule. And the people that try to make this connection, they have an agenda, the neo pagans, because they wanna solidify their belief system. And the only way they could do that is they retrofit their belief system back into antiquity. Right? That's what they're trying to do. They're the ones to try and make this connection. But when you look at history and the data, it doesn't add up. Because again, Yule was known as a midwinter period, not a festival. And it doesn't really become a festival, or we're not aware of any festival until a good 1,000 years. A good 1,000 years. And then, even with the festival, we don't know exactly what they did in the festival because we have very little knowledge of the Norse religion when it comes to the practicality of their theology. We know nothing. And what we do know is it was midwinter and it was at least a good 1,000 years after the fact. And yeah, you're going to have to show us a peer reviewed evidence that demonic elves have a direct correlation with the celebration of Christ. Like, because you're making the claim, right? You're making the claim. Yeah, you're saying that it's worshiping Satan. Prove it. Prove it. Prove that Christmas is the worship of Satan. All you're telling me is that you're saying it. You're not proving it. Because you have to prove that Christians are committing idolatry. Idolatry is worshiping something other than Christ, than the God of the Bible. Please provide primary evidence of Christians, of actual Christians who follow the teachings of Christ, worshiping something other than God on Christmas. You got to give me something in history of actual Christians, not just people who say they're Christians, but people who actually follow the teachings of Jesus, decidingly to worship something other than the God of the Bible on Christmas. All right. Well, we're not talking about Santa and elves, right? You saw the title of the video. We're talking about Yule. That's what we're discussing here, right? So, but to humor you a little bit, Santa actually is a very embellished myth that actually does have its roots on an actual historical person who was at the Council of Nicaea, Saint Nicholas. Now, is he alive today? No. Does he fly in the air with reindeer? No. None of that. No Christian believes that, right? But here's the thing: Germanic mythology, great. All right, so you're giving me something here, right? Give me primary evidence of Germanic mythology, not what somebody thinks it is, not speculation of Germanic mythology. Primary. You got to give me. Do you have a papyri? Do you have something that was etched in the cave? Right, a primary evidence of Germanic mythology that talks about Santa, elves, and reindeer. Right, you got to cite a source. Somebody who's expert in folklore or Germanic mythology. Somebody who has some accreditation. Like, present that here, and we'll look at it. And we will look at it. Right, Bishop Saint Nicholas of Myra. Right, he existed. Now, the myth around him is not true. Right. So your statement here, what you're telling us is, I have nothing to back up my claim. I just have rhetoric and name calling. Because if you had something to back up your claim, you would have used it, sir or ma'am. So I can't tell what you are by the name Hebrew Elevation. You cannot back up your claim. Right? And again, you're making another claim. He says we're idol worshipers. Please provide evidence where actual Christians who follow the teachings of the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, for some reason abandon their allegiance to him to worship some other God at this time every year. Please show that to us. Because if not, all you're doing is what my man Kevin Benton calls trust me, bro, theology. I don't know you from a can of paint. I don't believe nothing you're saying. You got to prove it. You got to prove it. Again, you just made another claim. Prove. Show us primary evidence that there isn't any correlation between St. Nicholas and Santa Claus. You got to show us. Because you're just saying things. You're just saying things. Why in the world should I believe you? I've never seen you even in my chat before. But I should believe what you're saying? I don't know you. You see what I'm doing in my presentation? I'm citing sources. I'm citing people. I'm citing books. I'm giving you reasons why I've come to my conclusion. All you're giving me is your opinion. And respectfully, it doesn't mean much to me because I don't know you. But we told you that the myth and the embellishment comes way after the actual person. You're not saying nothing new here. What are you saying? No Christian believes that this dude's running around Christmas Eve with reindeer. No one's doing that. It says reindeer elves come from Scandinavian culture. Okay, so you must not have been watching the the video, right? You must not have. Because look, let me show you again. Let me show you again. You said Scandinavian culture, right? Well, guess what, buddy? And this is from a website called Scandinavian Archaeology. The fact is, we know terribly little about Norse paganism in actual practice. You can't back up your claim because the experts can't. There's no data for you to be like, there's a one-on-one correlation between elves, reindeer, and Scandinavian culture. Because when it comes to paganism, the practice of Norse paganism, we don't know much. So unless you have some sort of degree in Scandinavian folklore, I'm gonna side with the experts. False? Once again, prove it. Because you're just saying false. You're not telling me why it's false. So this is what we're gonna do. I'm showing you where I came to my conclusions with people who actually know folklore and archaeology. You're giving me just your opinion, right? Okay, here you just made another claim. The cultural continuity still persists in Scandinavia. That's another claim with no proof behind it. Right. Very little. Very little. So do you know the little that they do know? Because within that small circle of whatever they do know, can you show me a one-to-one correlation between the elves and Santa from Scandinavia? Paganism? Because this is what we're gonna do. This is what we're gonna do. The next time you make a claim, you're gonna have to cite something. If you make a claim and you don't cite something, I'm gonna remove you from the chat. Or one of the moderators will do it for me. So moderators, keep a lookout for this guy or this woman. I don't know what you are. The next time Hebrew Elevation makes a claim and does not cite an actual source, okay, I'm going to be real graceful here because you just made another claim. I don't know where you're getting that from. The Samsi people are Scandinavior or historical reindeer herders. You got to cite sources. So, all right. So this thing about historical reindeer and mythology and flying right stems from people and is known and documented. Great. The next thing that you write should be a citation of the documentation. If the next thing you say in the chat is not that, moderators remove Hebrew Elevation. Don't say it's true. No. You say it's documented. Cite the document. The next time you write something in this chat, better be a citation of a document that we can actually find. If you do not, you'll be removed from the chat. And big up to Michelle, Bodega Ladies, in the check-in. Provide the document, because now you're saying there is documentation. Great. Give me the name and the writer of the document. You say anything but that next, you'll be banned from the chat. Right? Trust me, bro, is not a citation. Super, super facts. Right? So, all right. So don't dance around the subject. Provide the document that you speak of. Because we on BK Apologists, we believe in facts. And facts don't care about your feelings. Right? So, because I'm about to wrap this up. I'm already done. I've already shown you that thousands of years prior to there even being a festival called Yule, the church was already celebrating the birth of Christ. And that the word Yule itself didn't mean a festival when we first learned about the month from the Venerable Bede. It just meant midwinter. And it wasn't until 10th, 12th century that we found out there was a festival even called Yule. And we don't know how they really practiced or participated because we know very little about Norse paganism. The only thing we know, it happened midwinter, and it happened once every 9 years? Hold up. Hold up. Yeah, once every 9 years. So clearly, this has nothing to do with Christmas. The neo-pagans of today try to make this connection. History doesn't let them. History doesn't let them. Right? So that's what it is. So I see our good friend Hebrew Elevation has decided to just be an observer, which is great. You know, and you figured out that, you shouldn't make claims unless you back it up. And that's good. Because unfortunately, many people will just be strong and wrong and just be a bull in the China shop and just run roughshod. You know what I mean? You figured out, you're like, you know what? I really don't have it, at least not now. And you stopped. So I respect that. I respect that, Hebrew Elevation. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Doesn't mean you can't get it. If you do, listen, after the video, you can find some actual documentation that I could look at, put it in the comment section. I will look at it later. I really will. But I appreciate the fact that you heard what was being said and you stopped. That's just that I can, and we, the chat, can respect you for that. So thank you. I definitely appreciate that. So, with that being said, Yule is clearly not a ripoff of Christmas because they were celebrating the birth of Christ thousands of years before Yule. Yule was just midwinter and not a festival, not until the 10th, 11th century. And even then, we don't know how they participated. And whatever they participated in only occurred once every 9 years. So, with that being said, this is BK signing off. Peace.